It seems Harvard is being attacked by the administration for reasons outside of what I believe the administration should be doing. It seems like it's being targeted, cutting the funds, attacking students, foreign students, attacking students that are learning from other countries, or threatening them or putting fear so that they don't return. That to me is really just bullying.
When we look at the actions that the government has taken, there seems to be an inconsistency between those actions and their alleged reasons to take them. For example, the suspension of funding, for the most part, affects people in the basic sciences, people who are working in labs, doing research on Parkinson's, on Alzheimer's, on cancer. There is no cause and effect connection between that and anti-Semitism or viewpoint diversity or racism.
Well, joining me now is Dr. Miguel Cardona, who is the former US Secretary of State for Education from the Biden administration. Hello to you.
Hi, thank you for having me.
A lot going on in the education sector with the arrival of the Trump administration. What do you think the intention of the Trump administration is, both at the school level and, of course, at the university level?
Yeah, well, again, thank you for having me. And I think we can take a step back and say there's a lot going on in every sector. But education is not immune to some of the challenges that we're experiencing. I believe, in the K-12 space, in the grammar school and middle and high school, there's an effort to privatize public education by starving public education of its necessary funds, so that the private option sounds better. When I was serving as Secretary of Education, I found that there was an attempt to discredit public education or to create fear or division, in order to then offer through vouchers a private option for families that starves the public education system.
And does this have an ideological aim as well?
You would have to ask President Trump, really. I've decided not to try to put myself in their shoes to try to understand what's happening. But I could tell you as a parent, I could tell you as a public educator for over 27 years, that there is a systemic dismantling or an attempt to systemically dismantle public education. And we know public education in America is the great equalizer. This country, grew when we made public education available to all students. I credit President Carter for recognizing the importance of making sure we have common standards in terms of access, for public education here, and creating the Department of Education. So I believe that that's the strategy for K-12. In higher education, it seems very much retribution, going after universities that allow freedom of speech, or high performing universities that are well renowned all over the world, attacking the Ivy League schools in a very deliberate, and many argue capricious, way is unfortunate, and it leaves a stain on what I know is a bright spot for the United States of America, our higher education system.
And again, what is the intention? Is it simply that those schools have, amongst other things, been have hosted opinions which do not appeal to MAGA?
It could be, right? One of the things on university campuses, when I was Secretary of Education, after the attacks, the October 7th attacks, we had to make sure that we protected all students, and really took a strong stance against anti-Semitism, while also allowing freedom of speech on campus. And to me, you can have both. There is no room for threats, harassment toward any students. And in many cases, we had to really double down on our efforts to fight anti-Semitism on campus without question. So I want to acknowledge that. At the same time, if there are differences of opinions on campus, it could be done in a way that is respectful. What I'm finding is the current administration, or the way they're arbitrary in their enforcement of the civil rights rules, it seems to be targeting specific universities, specific leaders who maybe have allow for speakers who have a different opinion of the president to be on campus. And I think that's dangerous, whether it's Democrats in office or Republicans in office. It's dangerous when you have political ideology driving higher education institutions. That's just, it's un-American and it's not democratic.
I mean, obviously, there's a lot of focus on Harvard University, the oldest and perhaps most celebrated American university. Do you think Harvard did lose its way in recent years?
Without having information right in front of me right now, it'd be hard for me to make a generalized statement. But what I will tell you is I do believe Harvard has done a great job providing students with an opportunity to speak up, also protecting students. And if there are cases of anti-Semitism, let that play out in the court and let there be actions about that. But I don't want to be the judge and jury here without having all the information in front of me. I will tell you that it seems Harvard is being attacked by the administration for reasons outside of what I believe the administration should be doing. It seems like it's being targeted, cutting the funds, attacking students, foreign students, attacking students that are learning from other countries or threatening them or putting fear so that they don't return. That to me is really just bullying. I was a school principal, right? And we taught kindergartners not to bully, to treat others with respect. And it's okay to have difference of opinion, but what we see right now, and I think what we've almost become desensitized to, is the bullying that's happening. I commend Harvard for standing up on the principles and for fighting back. And to be quite frank with you, I would put my bets on the attorneys from Harvard over the attacks from the administration.
Now, I was going to ask you about that in a moment, but I do just want to ask about this question about foreign students, because it's been an issue in this country as well, as far as the levels of immigration. I mean, is there now, compared to 20 or 50 years ago, too much exchange, too many foreign students arriving on major campuses in the US and elsewhere? Is there any case to make on that?
I have to go back to what President Biden used to say. This country was formed on an idea. My parents came from Puerto Rico. I've learned with students from different parts of the world, and that's what makes this country so special. Uh, we, as a Department of Education, when I was serving as secretary, moved the oversight of Section 117, which is, looking at foreign gifts and monitoring that to the Federal Student Aid Office to make sure that there was oversight over it, where it was with the attorneys and that wasn't an oversight arm. We took that very seriously. With that said, I don't believe that what we're doing now is appropriate, nor do I think it addresses the issue. I mean, our universities are sought out from all over the world. That's something to celebrate. If anything, a lot of the ingenuity and innovation that we get in this country is because of students from different parts of the world who came here to study here, who stayed here, who became a part of the fabric of our country. So, no, I don't think the answer to your question is that we're allowing too much. Do we have to have safeguards? Yes. Should we be monitoring to make sure that foreign students are not part of some bigger plot to get information for other countries? Absolutely. I'm a big believer. That's a bipartisan thing. But when you're fear mongering and when you're pointing fingers at students who are coming to get a degree, who represent their family, represent all that's good in higher education. When you're starting to target those students, you're creating fear. And what you're doing is really lessening the interest in those universities. But again, I put my money on our universities who they've weathered storms in the past and they're going to weather this one as well.
But I suppose there is a question in the minds of some people as to whether people who have the privilege of coming from abroad to benefit from American education should in some way be tested to see if they're loyal to American principles.
Right. Well, if you want to start talking about questioning loyalty to American principles, let's look at some of the some of the people that were let out of prison after an attack on the Capitol. I would start there as well. At the end of the day, we must make sure that our higher education institutions are broad, that free thinking is allowed. And we have to make sure in the same breath, I'll tell you, we have to make sure whether foreign or domestic, we have to monitor against people who have a bad intent toward their communities or our country. So I don't think, I worry about getting into a time where we have one person deciding what's right and wrong for our entire country, which, to me, what I've seen from Congress is, from half of Congress, they've just basically folded and they said whatever he says goes. That's not how this country was formed. That's not what our forefathers had in mind when they wrote the Constitution. We must have equal parts of government that check one another. We don't have that. We're starting to see the courts act up, speak up and challenge. But I'm disappointed with what I'm seeing in Congress. We cannot have one person be deciding what's right, what's wrong for the entire country, and all of us passively just sit by and watch it happen.
Now, you said that you would
We have
back.
time for about one more
Yeah,
question.
yeah, I know that. Thank you, Hector.
Yep.
You said that you would back Harvard's lawyers against the other lawyers, against the government's lawyers. But, we have had a 50% cut in the Department of Education staffing. We've also had rulings, for example, in Massachusetts, in favor of preserving Department of Education. I mean, a lot of the world is looking on at this and thinking, is the Trump administration going to get away with this in the area of education? What do you think?
Look, and I like the fact that this interview, I have folks who are listening who are not from the United States, because it really gives me an opportunity to talk about the power of democracy. This is democracy in action. I welcome political ideology differences and people challenging my positions when I was talking about student debt relief, when I was talking about more access to higher education. That's healthy to have debate about that and have policy differences. And, President Donald Trump won the election. So we're seeing his policy implementation. And some of it is going too far, and the courts are holding it back, right? So that's democracy in action. I may not agree with everything that he has, but I have to have faith in our system of, three parts of government, right? The executive branch, the congressional branch, and then the judicial. So now the judicial is stepping up and saying, well, wait a minute, that's not constitutional. Now he'll appeal it. That's democracy in action. We must respect that whether we agree with it or we don't agree with it. I personally don't believe what's happening now is good for students. I don't think it's good for our country. I don't think it's good for our economy. I mean, I talked. It's not just education, right? Look at the terrorists. I don't agree with that. Now the courts will have their say, and we will abide by the courts. And it's the expectation that the administration abides by the court's rulings as well. We also have midterm elections in less than a year and a half. So that will also provide some checks and balances to make sure that we're doing the will of the people, the way the Constitution says. That's the beauty of democracy. And for those who are watching abroad and saying, what the hell is going on? My last conversation with President Biden about a month ago, he said to me, he said, the first time Donald Trump won, people were like, is this a fluke? And then he said, no, we're back, America's back. And now he won again. And countries are asking, what's going on over there? Well, whether I agree with it or not, this is democracy. And democracy will prevail. I disagree strongly with what's happening in many cases, in many of the things that are coming out of the White House. However, democracy, we must have faith in democracy because it's going to outlast all of us. And it's something that I want the whole world to see, that the system of democracy in America, we must preserve it at all costs. And that's what we're doing now. That's why we ask folks to vote. That's why we stay informed. And that's why we listen to both sides of the argument before making a decision.
Well, let's speak now to Fernando Rimas, who is the Ford Foundation Professor of the Practice of International Education and Director of the Global Education Innovation Initiative at Harvard University. Hello to you.
Good morning.
How seriously do you take the threat, or do you see it even as a threat, from the Trump administration towards your university?
Very seriously. Over the last month, the administration has taken a number of actions that represent an existential threat to the institution. The Secretary of Education, about a month ago, sent a series of demands to the institution that, in effect, violated U.S. law. It proposed that we should get a third party by mutual agreement that would audit our processes to hire faculty, that would audit our curriculum, that would audit how we admit students in the university. And this would represent giving up the autonomy which is essential to any institution that is going to ensure academic freedom. The university, which had actually been in conversations with the administration and open to understanding any of their requests that had to do with protecting students and so on, upon receiving that letter, concluded that there was no option to us but to basically deny that. And then in response, the secretary ordered the cancellation of a number of contracts that fund largely scientific research in the university. I do want to underscore, because some members of the administration seem to have a confused idea of what these contracts are. These are not gifts or transfers from the government to Harvard. These are contracts that reflect national priorities. For example, in science, when the National Science Foundation determines that they want to advance knowledge on various ways to cure cancer or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, a range of research institutions, including ours, compete for those funds. And the reason we have so many of those is because of the excellence of our teams, excellence that is the result of the autonomy that we have in hiring the people who work in the university. So that had a devastating impact, and the result of Harvard's legal challenge to that decision of the administration was that then the administration indicated that we would no longer be allowed to receive foreign students and scholars. Foreign students represent about a third of all the students at Harvard. They are essential to our mission, especially in the sciences, in what's called STEM. They are a very high percentage of our doctoral students and postdoctoral students. Without them, we would have to considerably diminish our research output. The reason they are essential is not only because they are very talented and they bring unique perspectives and skills and so on, but because the compositions of teams with people from different parts of the world just makes them more creative in solving problems.
Okay, what do you
yeah.
see as the motivation for this attack on the way Harvard is running itself?
So I will describe what the administration says are the motivations, and then conclude that it's unlikely, given the evidence, that those are the sole motivations. The administration initially expressed that they were concerned with anti-Semitism in American campuses. I can tell you that we are also very concerned with anti-Semitism in America and in the world. It is the oldest hatred. It is a growing hatred. You may remember that in 2017, a group of neo-Nazis paraded in one of our oldest universities, the University of Virginia, chanting heinous things. Jews will not replace us. Sadly, the then President of the United States, Donald Trump, referred to those neo-Nazi demonstrators as good people when he indicated that there were good people on both sides. And so the issue of anti-Semitism in America is serious, is real, it is concerning to many of us. Since October 7th, there were on campus, as there were on many universities, a series of actions that were less than civil in how students who had different views on the situation, on the conflict in the Middle East between in Israel and Gaza, that basically demonstrated anti-Semitism and in some cases also Islamophobia. And as a result of that, the university commissioned two task forces of professors who did very serious work. All of this happened before the election of Donald Trump, before the last election. And these two task forces produced two reports that did an extremely thorough analysis of the situation on campus with anti-Semitism as well as with Islamophobia and made a series of recommendations. The report on anti-Semitism documents a number of instances of anti-Semitism, and the main expression of anti-Semitism on campus is through shunning, the isolation of students, in particular students who express pro-Israel views. That, of course, should not be happening at Harvard or in any university. No one should be shunned. No one should be isolated because of views and beliefs that they have. So this is all to say that the administration's alleged reason for the attacks on Harvard are a problem that we recognize as a problem and that we actually have taken concrete steps to address way before the administration issued those demands. So it's unlikely that that's the sole problem. The university has changed its narrative about why they are doing this. And it seems to me they are in search of a justification. And the second reason they have said is because they believe that our approach to promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion constrains intellectual pluralism, viewpoint diversity, an issue that the university, especially our current president, Alan Garber, and provost, also recognize as important, an issue that is being addressed through a number of initiatives. The last rationale the administration has communicated it justifies their attacks really on the university is the fact that they believe that there is racism, for example, in how faculty are appointed and in how students are admitted. Again, an issue that is the subject of consideration, debate in the university. So when we look at the actions that the government has taken, there seems to be an inconsistency between those actions and their alleged reasons to take them. For example, the suspension of funding, for the most part, affects people in the basic sciences, people who are working in labs, doing research on Parkinson's, on Alzheimer's, on cancer. There is no cause and effect connection between that and anti-Semitism, or viewpoint diversity, or racism.